Everybody, welcome back. This is Inside Fitness Radio presents Total Fitness Podcast. My name is Matthew.
I'm Walter. And today we are very happy to have a very special guest with us. Scott Carney is joining us. Why is he joining us? Well, I read one of his books and it got me really turned on. I don't know how many of you have listened to us progressively, but I spent all last winter in my underwear on my back porch every morning in the snow, rolling in the snow. Yeah, it was really great and horrible at the same time. That led me to research, and I ended up finding and reading Scott's book about his adventures with Wim Hof and climbing Kilimanjaro.
Wait, so let me get this straight. You were sitting on in your back porch on your underwear without having read my book. You were just like the underwear back porch guy.
I'd sort of heard about Wim. I'd heard about Wim.
All right.
Since then, I've seen his show and all that stuff. But I'd heard about him and I thought, this is cool. I'm going to see how this works, because I like to push myself past certain barriers. Always. So, anyway, that's why I read your book. And that's why I thought I've got to talk to this man, because it's not just about the underwear and the cold. It's about the underwater training. It's about all the other ways that we can push ourselves and develop ourselves. And you seem to be an expert on that.
You could say that. I mean, I do some cool
what
things.
You just did for the last 6 days, right? So I'd like to just introduce Scott now. Scott, if you'd like to tell us a little bit about yourselves, expand on what I've said.
Sure. So I'm Scott Carney, investigative journalist, anthropologist, and New York Times bestselling author. And I know that sounds like a really big thing, but basically I'm a guy who likes to dive into like one research project for 1 year at a time and go as deep as I can. Oftentimes looking at like the places where humanity gets uncomfortable, like where things are hard, where things are stressful, where things can change. And part of that is like this biohacking stuff, right? With my book, What Doesn't Kill Us, and the Wedge, I'm really talking about how by putting yourself in a physical stress will change the way your body and your mind work. But other books I've done, I've worked in war zones, I've interviewed mobsters, I've done a lot of like stupid, dangerous stuff, and yet somehow come out the other side. And I think in one piece. And I'm just really psyched to be able to talk with you guys. This is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, that's a lot to take in, that you've gone from monsters to war zones to, again, what we kind of wanted to focus on today. But let's just get the overall picture. What made you want to jump into this lifestyle? Why did you want to push past your limits? Why did you want to do all this investigative journalism and kind of see what, these things are about?
Yeah, well, for me, the point of life is not to amass the most wealth and die comfortably in a bed someday, right? For me, the point of life is to have experiences that are meaningful, at least to me. Like, and it's really cool that so many people read my books, right? But to me, I want to be able to go out there and try to learn as much as I can about the world, realizing that I'll never know it all. Like, it's never going to happen. And to see myself in stressful situations and to see other people in stressful situations is just a way to, I guess it's been a lifestyle. In my 20s, I was a little bit more on the, sort of dark side of things. I wrote a book about organ trafficking, where I was like 6 years wandering around the world, looking at people buy and sell organs and bones and things like that. I did a book on the dark side of meditation, for where people like intensively meditated, got really deep into their minds, and how that did not always turn out well, and documenting many, many deaths along that route. And then I found this dude, this was in 2010. I saw this article, maybe it was like an AMA or something on Reddit, about this guy named Wim Hof, who was this guy who could sit basically naked on an iceberg, and says he could control his immune system, control his body temperature. And I had just spent like years looking at people dying doing meditation. And I was like, this guy's going to get people killed. So long story short, I got a commission to go debunk him from Playboy. And I went out there totally ready to be like, this guy's a charlatan guru, but it didn't work. I learned his method. I ended up sitting in my underwear on banks of rivers, melting the snow around me with my body, climbing up mountains. And I do a lot of stuff in my underwear. But I was shirtless in Playboy, which was pretty cool because
Yeah.
usually they go for women. And then I ended up writing the book What Doesn't Kill Us, which was like super popular and was sort of helped establish Wim as this credible dude. And climbed up in that book. I ended up climbing up Mount Kilimanjaro, where, you know, again, I think I was in a bathing suit, not my underwear at that time. So I'd upgraded, but I was in my bathing suit. It was negative 30 degrees outside and I could handle it. Like, I wasn't super comfortable, but I could handle it. And this led me to thinking about, you know, not only stressful events, sort of like organ trafficking, stressful events. I wrote a book on like mobsters, stressful events, that sort of thing, but also like how that physical stress, that sensation of physical stress, connects you to the environment, and that connection changes the way you relate to the outside world, which also changes what's going on inside your body. And I learned that by changing and re-signifying what stress actually is, you gain a ton of resilience. And it's not only good for like doing hard things, because in some ways, who gives a fuck that I could climb up Mount Kilimanjaro in a bathing suit, or I can hold my breath for a long period of time? Like, that's irrelevant. But it's really great for anxiety. It's really great for autoimmune illnesses. It's just really great for just overall health and resilience. And that has been the biggest and most important takeaway from my works, is that there is this mind-body connection that gets sharpened by doing hard experiences.
Right. I know Walter has a million questions, so I want to jump in before he takes them all away. But when you're in those situations, getting ready to, whether it be, again, the organ trafficking, the mobsters, going to see Wim, what is that mindset? Do you have an open mindset? Because again, you kind of went, you got that commission from Playboy. You went in with the mindset of, I'm going to disprove this guy. Yep. Do you typically have a certain, I guess you could say, again, it's journalism. So do you have a certain angle that you're trying to take to actually go into an experience, or do you try to go into it with an open mind and see what happens and see how you as a journalist, or even just as a person, can handle it?
So I have an idea of what I'm going to find whenever I do a story. You cannot be a journalist and not have an idea of what you're going to find. No editor wants to hear the pitch, hey, I want to go try the cool stuff and see what happens. Like that doesn't fly at any magazine. So I always have an idea of what I'm going to find, but I'm open to change as I go there. And sometimes editors don't want that. Sometimes you can be open to change and you deliver a story that's totally not what they expect, and they're like, fuck you, canceled. But I've been lucky that doesn't happen too much. With all of them, I want to relate to my sources. I want to understand really where they're coming from, because I have this central belief that every person in the world thinks that they're a good person. It doesn't matter who they are. You know, you can be a serial killer. You could be Hitler. You could be, you know, I don't care how bad you want to go. I think all of those people have at least an internal logic for why they're a good person. And I want to understand that when I go to meet them, not to let them off the hook, note you, but to understand that in my mind so that I can relate to them and write a more empathetic story about that thing. So when I met Wim, I knew I could sit outside and just sort of watch people go through this, but the story wouldn't have been as meaningful unless I tried it too. And I'm always open to new experiences when I'm reporting, because I think it just makes things better. It's very rare for me to say I'm not going to do something. The only time I can remember like really turning down an assignment or like an opportunity was when I was in central India working with militants and they were telling me that I'd have to go through like a minefield to see the location. I was like, you know what? I can handle gunshots. I can handle some like traffic accidents and exertion, but I'm really, really not going to be okay with landmines. There's my limit. Landmines. Yeah. There's my limit.
Yeah. Yeah. Most people, it's what's the limit? It's, you know, jumping into a pool in freezing cold water, which obviously you did, but no, for you, it's stepping on a landmine. I mean, that's pretty sane. I'll give you that.
Yeah. That's not a stress that I can.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah. It's not a stress that I can adapt to. Right.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I'm very like, I guess the reason why I bring that up is because I do things that are perceived of as dangerous from the outside, but they're always taken with the understanding that there should be ways to correct a problem when it's happening, right? So jumping into ice water might be painful, right? It might be difficult, but you're not going to die unless you're like trying to hold your breath under ice, then you will die. But if you're just jumping into ice water is not that bad. Like climbing up with your shirt off up a mountain is not that bad, especially if you've got a coat in your backpack. Like it's important to try these things and then have a plan B for when things go wrong, and realize that in most cases you have there's still actions you can take if you plan out correctly. There's still actions you can take to rectify something if you've made a mistake.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's going to be any documentarian is going to be looking for the truth of the matter that they're talking about. You have to choose the topic. You're right, but I mean, one of the things that I appreciated about your book was that Wim was not given as this wonderful godlike character. You saw the dark side. You saw the madness, if you will, behind him as well, to get a truer story of who he is. But it was also all those other stories. It was I was really taken by the underwater training, as a methodology as well.
Sure.
That could be used.
So the underwater training, for people who maybe haven't read the book, there were two sets of this. One was with this amazing breathwork teacher named Brian McKenzie, and the other with the big wave surfer, Laird Hamilton. And both of them do this. We're working on that time, something called Extreme Pool Trainer, XPT, which was where you would lift weights underwater or swim underwater for long periods of time. You're trying to stress your limits, but also keeping in mind that you don't want to pass out underwater, because passing out underwater is fatal.
Yeah.
And 7 people have died by mixing the Wim Hof breathing method and thinking that it was like free diving. And there's something called shallow water blackout that happens particularly with the Wim Hof type breathing, which is a hyperventilation based breathing. And so that's super dangerous. And but with what they're doing, they're trying to work on your parasympathetic side, which is your rest and digest modality, the rest and digest side of your body and of your nervous system. And what they would do is they would get you into a parasympathetic state and then have you start lifting weights underwater, and you sort of mix and match what you're trying to do in both What Doesn't Kill Us in my book, The Wedge, is you're trying to find ways to match the parasympathetic side, which is your rest and digest, with your sympathetic side, which is your fight or flight. And you're trying to put yourself in situations where your body automatically wants to go one direction, and then you force it into the other direction. So lifting weights underwater, lifting weights is like sort of this aggressive, sympathetic fight or flight stuff. You're using adrenaline, you're just sort of getting your muscles. It's like grit, right? And then, but if you put yourself underwater, the other goal is to, you trigger your dive reflex, which lets you hold your breath longer, slows your heart rate. And, you also don't want to breathe underwater. You want to relax so you can gain more time. So if when you pair these two experiences, you really train both sides of your nervous system at once. Wim Hof method is the same. You jump into cold water automatically makes you want to go into fight or flight. And then you tell yourself, no, I'm going to relax in this. And by relaxing, I gain endurance. And you find that, the longest ice bath I've done is like 30 minutes at about 32 degrees, 33 degrees Fahrenheit. In Celsius, that's much easier. That's 0 degrees. It's the only conversion I'm good at as an American. And you can also do this in heat. Heat makes you want to drive your system into that parasympathetic, that sort of rest state. And then you work out in the heat and you drive yourself up. Hot yoga is a great example of this. I didn't actually go to in my book, but it's like you're doing these yoga poses, you're being aggressive, and yet your body's being told to relax. So by pairing those external stimulus with internal stimulus, you're telling your body that it can do things that it's not anticipating that it could do.
Yeah.
That it should do.
The interesting thing with that too is I kind of want to touch back a little bit, because you did say, again, not necessarily hard to jump into an ice bath. It's not necessarily hard to climb a mountain, whatever it might be. But at the end of the day, getting to that point, was that something big you had to overcome to actually be able to get to that point? Or is it, again, you you just understood what you were doing, you understood the assignment, I guess you could call it, and you just went into it with that mindset? And if so, if that was the mindset you went into it with, how did you get yourself to that position to be able to, again, fight that fight or flight plus relax, or vice versa?
Well, I mean, so it's a pretty open-ended question, and it's easier for me to go into like a specific example. Let's just talk about an ice bath, because we can all imagine what an ice bath is like, and it's hard for me to truly put you on the top of Mount Kilimanjaro. We've all been cold before, right?
Yeah.
And the hardest part of an ice bath is looking at an ice bath. You're not in it. You're just looking at the ice bath, and you see the ice cubes. Maybe you see a temperature that says it's super cold, and you look at it and you're like, fucking hell no. I do not want to go in the ice bath. Maybe that's good for that Scott dude or that Wim dude, but for me, I'm especially bad with cold. And like, honestly, that is the universal response. Everyone feels that. I feel that when I look at an ice bath still, and I've been doing this for like 12 years. But that anticipation is actually really important, because that's your anxiety reflex. That's your brain saying, here's what the future is going to be like. And I'm going to ramp it up to like 10 and say, this is going to be terrible. And I'm going to prep you to say that this is going to be terrible, so that when you get in, it's going to be even worse, because it's going to confirm all of that terribleness in your mind. And even if I've done probably 1,000 ice baths, I mean, a lot of ice baths, even when I look up at a mountain and I've climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, that's 18,000 feet. And it's super cold. Even if I want to look at like a 14,000 foot peak here and a much, more, nice environment, I'm like, I don't want to take my shirt off. That's crazy. So that anticipation is sort of your brain's protective instincts. And what we're telling your brain is that, no, you can do it. And you override that fear. And fear is not necessarily bad in all cases, but it's usually very conservative. And so then you get in the ice bath, and then this is actually pretty hard, right? Because your body automatically responds to the stimulus coming from the outside and goes into survival mode. That sensation in ice water is literally death, because your body goes into a thing where it shunts the blood to the core. It's called vasoconstriction. It kicks up heating responses. And if you're not super used to it, it can be overwhelming. Your breath will go out of control. You'll breathe like this. And then you'll think to yourself, get the fuck out of this ice tub. And everyone has that response. And your goal in getting to an ice bath is say, it's okay, I can relax. And you get your breathing under control. And there's a couple of techniques to do it. But the easiest one is just take a big, deep breath in and then slowly exhale like that. And that's just like stops that hyperventilating thing from happening. And there, boom, you are now mind over matter. Like, you may have not realized this may have not sounded all that strange, but you have literally changed an automatic process in your body. You've flipped it to conscious control. And 10 seconds after that, the ice bath may not be comfortable, but you can say, that's just sensation on my skin, because I didn't die. I went into fight or flight and I didn't die. And actually, I can do this for longer. And you stay there, maybe a minute, maybe 3 minutes, maybe 30 minutes. I don't know, wherever your point is where you get out. But sorry, to rewind just a second, before you get to those long edges, the third thing that happens in an ice bath is a different part of your brain kicks in, and it says, you've done enough. Mm-hmm. Don't worry. You did it. You relaxed. You're good. You can get out now. You also want to flip over past that one. You want to get over that last wave, because that's your brain just playing like reverse psychology on you. Mm-hmm. And then, what I say is that people should stay in over a minute, because I think that all of that turbulence is over by a minute. And then you stay in there as long as seems reasonable. You get out, and then usually you feel incredibly warm after you get out of an ice bath, because your body has ramped up all those heat reflexes, and you get out and you feel alive. You feel just clean in a way that's not about your skin, but it's about your soul. And it feels great. And if you stayed in too long, you might get after drop and shiver for a while. So the long-term practice is understanding how long you can stay in without getting after drop. After drop is a little miserable, because that happens when you've vasoconstricted, which means all the blood shunts to your core. Your extremities got colder. Mm-hmm. And now warm blood recirculates through the extremities, and it gets colder because it's circulating through a cold area. And then that comes back to your core, and you start like shivering uncontrollably. Mm-hmm. And so that whole process is like a learning thing about your body, and you're learning how your body adapts and changes in the environment.
Yeah, I've had that happen.
That's a very interesting explanation, because I remember my mother, towards the end of her life, had to have
Chemo?
blood being cleansed is called dialysis. Thank you. And it was that sensation of the cold blood running back into her body, because it has to be chilled for the process.
Oh, okay.
That drove her crazy. It wasn't sitting and having a needle in her arm or anything like that.
Right.
But she would shiver uncontrollably for an hour while the blood was being cleansed. So thank you for that. I do want to say thank you for one other thing, though, and that is that throughout the book, you approach these things and you show your humanity by talking about, am I crazy? Why am I doing this? Should I be doing this? And you question yourself, but you go ahead anyway. And to me, that's something that I try to face on a regular basis.
Right.
Why are you doing this? I have to do this. I have to prove this thing to myself that I can do this and see. So I want to thank you for that as well.
To go off, sorry, and just to go off of that point, where do you draw the line? Because when you are in that mindset of, like you said, there is that, maybe it's 30 seconds in, maybe it's a minute in, maybe you're doing a marathon and you're halfway through, or maybe there's 2 kilometers left, whatever it might be. When does it get to the point where you draw the line and say, you know what, this is enough. I've pushed myself enough. I can pull back. I can stop. Where does that tend to happen? And again, for yourself, but also what you've experienced through, all this, every project that you've done in the past as well.
So, it's funny. I might have answered this a little differently like 4 days ago. But I think that I'm a big fan of lightly held beliefs. Okay. I'm a big fan of like trying to figure out how the world works and understand it just enough to realize that you're probably wrong. Right. And we're all probably wrong about most things. And you do something by also checking it over and over again, and, when I climbed up Mount Kilimanjaro, we actually didn't make it to the true summit. We made it to Gilman's Point, which was like 100 feet. So 33 meters down from the true summit. And, honestly, it wouldn't have been that hard physically to make it to the summit, but we also realized that we were done. We were done. And it might have just raised the danger level just enough that we weren't comfortable with it. So we turned around at still a very incredible feat, but we don't get to like mark the book to be like, yes, we actually could have seen, the true summit. And I think it's important just to say, look, we all have limits in the battle of you versus nature. It's going to happen. But it really only happens after you've already tested your initial limits, right? It's after you get over that anxiety point. And then you're pushing further and you're actually having a conversation with your body and the environment, where the environment will eventually tell you, dude, you're done. You're done. And it takes practice. It takes practice to know that, because it's not the very first time you do something hard, you're still going to be listening to your inside voices. And you're not going to be listening to the outside. And it's an iterative process that happens over time. Otherwise, you run into damage, right? You run the risk of, in America, we love grit, right? We love the fact that you can fucking fight across that Sahara desert or up that mountain, and your body will take the toll if you do that. But damage is not my goal. My goal is flow. My idea is like, we connect with the environment, we use what's there, and when the environment is done, it will push you along a certain way. And then there's places for grit, but usually those places for grit are not anything you do with the word training associated with it, right? Grit is not useful if the goal is not important to you, because I don't want to damage myself for like, I don't know, just like a local bike ride around my house. I want to damage myself when it's like the only option was to damage myself. And then, then sure, I'll lose a toe. I'll lose a toe if I have to lose a toe, but my goal is never to lose a toe. Just like when we do the breath work, the goal is never I lead a fair number of breathwork trainings, and one of the things you do in the Wim Hof breathwork is you hyperventilate and then you hold your breath, and you hyperventilate and you hold your breath, and try to hold your breath for a really long period of time. The goal, when we have like 5 people doing it, is not to see who can pass out last. Like that would be a stupid goal. Yeah. And I try to make it very clear that we're just trying to get to that sensation of like, okay, I'm at my limit, and then maybe push a little bit further. But we're not aiming for, the big dramatic, I turned purple and had a seizure moment. Yes. And I think that some people in like the sort of fitness world think that damage is the goal. And that's just dumb, because I want to be able to do this until I'm in my 70s and 80s. I don't want to be able to do this until my mid 40s and be like, well, I fucked up. Now I have to be like in a wheelchair or just not having as much fun as I could over a long period of time.
Yeah. And it's that fighter's mentality, right? Like, so I'm a boxer, I coach boxing, and the amount of, fighters that we get coming in, they'll do the exact same thing. They will fall on they'll go out on their shields. They'll take that very last hit that will knock them out, and then they're gone for three months. They have to stop training because, again, they push past that in the training. Sure, in a fight situation, maybe it's a little different, but when you're just training, and I think we have become such a society of push past your limits as much as you can all the time, grind. And unfortunately, there's a lot of big influencers, and social media has caused quite a big issue with this as well. And Walter will talk to that.
Yeah. No, I have to agree. I mean, a lot of times it's like, what can we do for our Instagram page that's going to be more difficult? We're going to push ourselves that much harder. And how many injuries have occurred in the industry, this fitness industry, because of people pushing themselves to lift that extra 100 pounds and then tearing a muscle, right?
Yeah. I mean, so, and this is, you're touching on a very large point, which is what getting external influence and like making your goals external to yourself, right? So there's 2 ways I'll reference this. One, do I work out because I want to have a 6-pack? Or do I want to have a 6-pack because that has helped me achieve something, right? Personally, I think 6-packs are dumb, and there's no reason to try to get a 6-pack. I instantly don't have one, so maybe I'd change my my tune if I had this like rip-in 6-pack. But the thing is that I want to do things. I want to climb mountains. I want to go on long bike rides. I want to like go on rafting trips. I want to do these things, and I want the body that will allow me to do that. And it does not have to look like it's the cover of a fitness magazine. In fact, a lot of the people on the covers of the fitness magazines are extremely limited in the range of things that they can do. But they can do one thing like way better than me, but I might be able to do 10 things better than them. And it's not a competition, obviously. Like, there's no point to compete between those 2 things. But I think it's really, really important to say, look, I want to be a generalist. I want to have a good life. And that is essentially the goal. And the other thing that you raised was like the social media influencers. And this is even more toxic. It's like, why do we care about likes? Why do we care about followers? Why do we care about any of that stuff from these random strangers who interact with you? Like, it's like sort of like a collective psychosis that we have in the world that was told to us by media conglomerates that shit matters, and it doesn't fucking matter. Like, I have, I don't know, 8,000 or some number of people who follow me on Instagram, and I can get myself looking. I was like, oh, I posted something, and like I lost like 5 people because they didn't like what I said, and like I find myself caring about that, but these are strangers who are irrelevant to my life, and those metrics are really, really sad. And it's a really, really good idea if you have a big Instagram following or even a non-big Instagram following, is to put that fucking phone away and delete Instagram for a little bit, even just for a week or 2, and just take a social media cleanse to be like, what really matters. And what really matters is connecting with other humans and having conversations and back and forth versus just assuming what someone thinks and jumping on it. And then thinking that feedback that comes in the forms of comments and likes and interactions, whatever metrics you're, matters at all to who you are. I've met some of the most enlightened and wonderful and beautiful people that I know don't even have that stuff. It doesn't even matter.
Yeah.
Mm.
It's that anxiety that's revolved around it too. I mean, both Walter and I, I'm sure maybe at some point, maybe I'm wrong, but for us, especially as trainers, we see what's going on the fitness side of Instagram or TikTok or whatever it is, and we feel we have to copy that to get that audience to listen to us, because even though what we are posting about maybe just, again, lifting more weight than we should be lifting, or maybe posting a funny video that is completely irrelevant to what we're actually trying to get across as our main point. And it got to the point where we both just decided, you know what, screw this. We're going to post what we want to post about. If we end up losing a couple followers here or there, who gives a shit? If we end up pissing somebody off, that's on them. I can't control their emotions. And the problem still comes, though, and a lot of our listeners still deal with this, is the anxiety that just revolves around, it's uncomfortable to kind of go against the grain, or maybe it's uncomfortable to, again, as you said, that fear. Again, it's
and they won't reward you for bucking their trends. Like, I'm going to tell you, like, if you just write whatever you want and say whatever you want, the algorithm's not going to come in and be like, oh, great, you stood up for what you liked and what you really meant, and then we're going to give you more influence. No, that's who gives a fuck? You lost all your followers. You're still you. And like, why don't you try meeting people in person? Why don't you try to go into a gym, or like something like a church, or something like a place where people get together and do things and have a real fucking conversation with other humans? I grew up in the 90s, you know, born 1978, but like really, like, my consciousness comes online in the 90s. And we didn't even have cell phones, right? We would hang around, you'd be bored. You'd talk with other people, and you'd have stories, and like, it wasn't always excitement. It was just sometimes like, oh, cool, we're going to hang out. We're going to try to develop a real relationship. And we have fucking lost that. We are so hypnotized by this, you know, I want to say algorithms, but we're hypnotized by this belief that social media matters, and it's making us frankly insane. And so if you lose some followers or whatever, lose more. Your goal is to lose more followers.
This is going to sound very weird, but I have to thank the hackers who took my Instagram away about 3 weeks ago. I lost everything, and I've started again. Yay. But I no longer have this, oh, I must produce mentality to keep those people who I don't even know happy. So thank you, hackers. You know, it has been a godsend to lose Instagram for a while.
Yeah, we can't be bored anymore. We're not allowed to be bored, and that's what's going on. You have YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, TV, Netflix, all these services that the whole point is you are not supposed to be bored anymore. You're supposed to be constantly consuming. And again, with the social media, you get I'll use him as an example because he's that grit, go hard all the time type of guy, that David Goggins of, you know, and that's the level. If you're in fitness, you got to live up to that. If you are in makeup, you got to live up to like the James Charles, Kylie Jenner's, whatever it is. And that is the new level. And so many people, if they can't reach that, they just end up failing or just giving up because what's the point? I can't be them. That's the standard. I can't be them.
There can only be one David Goggins, and you ain't him. Like, all you can do is like worship at his feet, which seems really weird. Because honestly, when I listen to David Goggins, I'm like, you are a damaged man. Yeah, I think you have some.
That's why he's achieved.
But you know, it's funny. I've switched mostly to YouTube now, and I mostly just put up YouTube videos. Just because I can yammer for like 20 minutes and I'll say what I think and I'll just put it out there and be like, I'm done. Like, cool, there it is. There's not really much social interaction or banter. I mean, there's some comments, but no one replies and has threads and stuff. And I find it much better to be like, here's my idea. I'm going to spend some time on it. I'm not going to do a flashy dance and put sparkles on the things so the first second you love me. I'll say what I have to say, and then I'm going to go away. And I found that if I'm going to put my efforts into something, I'm going to put my efforts into there. Maybe I will then later hate this idea and be like, oh, I'm going to become a monk on a mountain. But you know, that's the next iteration, maybe.
That's the next book, right?
Well, at least you're back on a mountain again.
Yeah, right. See, can't go wrong. I win every time.
There you go. When it comes to kind of backtrack again, just because one of the big things our listeners do follow us for is breaking that barrier of being uncomfortable. And again, you've already touched on this, but when it does come to that point of getting just even into that mindset, you did mention, again, you just have to understand there's that fear and the anxiety. It's self-imposed. You know, we create it, we can destroy it. What do you have to say to somebody who, again, maybe they're stepping into the ring for the first time, they're stepping into a marathon for the first time? What is your process of understanding and kind of breaking that? Because again, it does take tons of practice. You know, for myself, you don't step into a ring the first time. You don't get comfortable until, you know, 5, 6, 7 times in there. Same with the marathon. You kind of go into it with, I've never ran this far before. What did you have to do to kind of build up and practice that mindset to get to that point?
I love that you've brought up both marathons and in the ring fighting, things that I have like basically zero experience with, since I don't run marathons and I don't MMA. That's
our thing.
So, but, you know, it works for other things too. I was thinking, as Matthew was saying, you know, I remember I used to be an actor. I remember the first couple of times I stepped on stage when I was so terrified of how I was going to fall on my face and everyone would laugh at me. And is my costume on, you know, that sort of thing. Or the first time you play the piano in front of someone, there's always going to be that fear. And it's not just physical things that do it. We create these barriers for ourselves for every new thing.
I think the most important thing to think about in these, you know, in anything that's hard, right? Anything you've put yourself into, what you're actually worried about is failure, right? You're actually worrying about the worst thing that could possibly happen to you, because that's where your brain goes first. And I've had lots of experiences of failure. I think failure is actually one of the most important things that anyone can do. And, you know, if you're getting into a ring, the first thing I would think of is like, well, I could get knocked out. And it could happen. And what's the worst that's going to happen? Well, there are some actually, you know, brain hemorrhagey things, but those are sort of the outlier. Hopefully those are the outliers. Hopefully you're not in the sort of fight where that's going to happen. Right. And hopefully you've made you've had some thoughts about this in advance. Right. But likely you're going to get there. You're going to get bloodied. You're going to fall down. And this dude who is maybe a better fighter than you, or maybe just got some lucky hits, beat you. And if you go in there with that mindset, that could happen, and then you let go and say, if that's the worst that can happen, then I can do my best, having accepted that. And, you know, they're going through the same mental challenges as well. And, you know, it's interesting. I had this experience about 4 days ago where I was paddling on a river in the middle of the Idaho wilderness. I was like 100 miles from any other wilderness with like a sort of a little rafting team. And I went over this rapid that I was overconfident in my own abilities. I was like, I got this. I can do whatever I want in the water because I'm good at water. And I hit a rapid. I got knocked off my paddle thing. What is it? It's like an inflatable kayak. Knocked off of that. And I looked backwards and I saw it getting tumbled in the rapids behind me because it was sort of caught in that eddy. I was like, oh, that's bad. And I'm in the water. And I'm like, but I'll be fine. I was dunked or under, it got wet, whatever. Then I didn't notice this, but I was facing backwards, and behind me was a big rock, like a huge rock, and the water was smoothly going over it, and behind it was a whirlpool, and I got sucked into this whirlpool. I haven't told anybody this actually, so first for people who get to hear this, I was sucked into the whirlpool, dunked underwater, and I was thinking to myself, I'd rather be breathing right now. and I was under, it was like a washing machine, and I was being caught in that eddy. Meanwhile, the other rafts were all going downstream because the water is still moving. I'm being stuck in one spot. So I don't have any crew around me. You know, no one's going to be rescuing me right here. And I come up, I sort of swim up, I get a little gulp of air. I'm like, okay, any second now, it's going to spit me out into the river and I'll be fine. That's just what rivers do. And I got dunked down again. And I'm like, and I'm sitting there and I'm not freaking out at all. Like I'm used to the cold, water was cold. And I just generally don't freak out because I think that, you know, I'm going to relax. But I was like, also, it's not cool to be here still. I came up again and I'm like, I'm still here. And I had this sensation of that I was next to like a rock and I don't know how, because my eyes were closed and there's white water all around me, but I know this rock is green and it had black flecks in it. It was perfectly smooth. I just knew this about this rock. And I went down again and I'm like, okay, I've got to do something. right? Something is wrong and I got to do something. And I don't know what it is, but I'm totally chill, but really would like to have like more regular access to air. And I put my hands on this rock and I feel it. I'm like, okay, go away. And I push against it. And now I'm not stronger than the Salmon River. Like there's millions of pounds of water behind me. But I think that push, that little bit of grit that I exposed at that point pushed me off just enough that more water got underneath me and that flow pushed me out. And I'm sort of outside and eventually, I look around, there's another rapid coming up. I can see it. I'm like, oh, I don't really want to do this again. I just did this. And then I saw a guy who was the river guide who was amazing. His name was Eli, and Boundary Expeditions. This is the name of the group. So look for Boundary Expeditions in Idaho. Eli will save your life. Eli was like bounding across the rocks like this golden-haired Adonis, and he throws me a rope. And I'm like, cool, I would really like a rope right now. Grab the rope, and he pulls me to safety, and everything happens. It's fine. In that whole time, I never panicked because I felt that there was more story to be told by Scott, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that not panicking is really, really important. And it resounds with what Laird Hamilton, the big wave surfer, once told me, is that when you're being tumbled by a wave, and this wave could be a metaphor for anything, right? Anything stressful, anything difficult, the fight, whatever, the thing that is out of control and has got control of you. When you're being tumbled by that wave, nature has you, and there is nothing that you can do. So in that situation, you just relax and go with it and envision what failure might look like. And then at some point, nature will give you an opportunity. There will be a moment where you have some agency, where some action you can take is meaningful. And that is when you use all of your grit, all of your strength, whatever you can use, you use it then, because when you don't have an opportunity, it's just a waste. Mm-hmm. And that gives you the overall resilience. And for me, that grit was even just not even it wasn't like a karate move on that rock. I just pushed that rock, but that was enough to free me. And that's what Laird does every time he gets tumbled by a big wave as well, is that we have this opportunity to know when you should relax and when you should push off. And the very worst thing that could have happened to me is I would have died, which, would suck. But, honestly, it wouldn't be the end of the world. I had a pretty good life. I would have been more sad about the people who were watching me die, because for them, this was a really traumatic experience, right? For them, they were like, oh my God, I'm so helpless. I can't do anything. I want to save this person. Totally irrational. My wife was there. She was not happy. And but for me, in that moment, I was like, I can do what I can do when I can do it. I can breathe when I'm above. I can hold my breath underneath. That's what I have control over. That's all I have control over. I'm going to wait for that moment where I can actually get out. And for anyone who is being currently tumbled by a river and listening to this podcast, in this particular moment, the actual thing you should do is not wait for the rock, but you should actually curl up into a ball and let the river push you out. I learned that afterwards, but now you know.
Would have been nice to know before, but live and learn.
Mm-hmm. Good.
One of the last questions that I have for you based on that is, when do you know when, again, let nature take its course? There gets to a point where maybe sometimes you get too comfortable doing the same thing. Now, that could be anything from you get home every day and you watch TV and you're just comfortable living that lifestyle, and you tell yourself, you know what, I don't need all this extra outside motivation or this outside
stimulus.
Thank you. You don't need that outside stimulus. I can just be content sitting on this couch watching TV every day because that's what I'm used to. I can just die happy here, and I can let myself. This is life. When does it become a point where you do have to snap out of things and realize, oh, this is real danger? Or again, whether it be white rafting or maybe, hey, this is really dangerous to just sit all the time, and in 20 years I'll wake up and I'll realize I wasted my life.
Well, we're all going to die. And I think this is an important thing to keep in mind, is that, and you get to be the pilot of your own life. That is one of the wonderful things about being human. And if you truly inhabit the idea that you want to be a diabetic who watches Netflix better than anyone else, go for it. Like, it's not, who am I to say you shouldn't do that? And who are you to say that they shouldn't do that? And that is absolutely a life path that is available to every single person in America, at least, in Canada, at least. And there's nothing wrong with it. totally fine. However, I will say that the more comfortable you are, the less range you have for the experiences that you can have in your life. And what the way I like to think of it is, the more you do, the more that you can do. And because we have this limited amount of time in life, my belief is that, and because we know we're going to die, we don't know what happens after you die, right? Maybe there's heaven, maybe there's hell, maybe there's like reincarnation, maybe, who knows? Maybe there's a void, maybe there's nothing, right? Because of that ultimate reality, which is definitely coming, and the unknown which occurs afterwards, I believe we all have an obligation to push ourselves and take risks, right? Because we have a finite amount of time on earth, we should get the most out of this limited amount of time, which means having more experiences, which means getting more range, getting more stories, getting more things that are experiences, not money. Money's sort of dumb. Sure, get some money, get enough money to be comfortable, but don't make money the driving force. It should be experiences and range, which are the driving force, because that's what makes us bigger and more resilient, and incidentally healthier too, because the more you sit on that couch, the less that you do, the more anxiety, the more the idea of doing things that are outside your range makes you anxious, which is probably bad for your insides. I don't think that just protecting yourself is good, because you're still going to die. Like you're gonna, that Netflix diabetic is going to be just as dead as me 100 years from now. Right. We're both going to be equally dead. And I think that if you're able to do new things to challenge yourself, I think that is, for me, a better life plan. You can make your own decisions about that, and that's fine. Like, we don't want to die early. We want to die young, as late as possible.
Yeah. I like that. I like that a lot. Any more questions there, sir?
No, I'm filled. So much stuff, man. And a lot that I agree with. Definitely. We choose the quality of our life. We judge the quality of our life. And I think that, particularly in a world with social media, where everybody's judging everybody and everybody's saying, no, that's what you should do, that's what you should do. The decision as to what my life will be becomes more difficult, but ultimately I have to make those decisions every day to get up and do that other thing, to do that other thing, to continue along, or to change everything in midstream. I think that due to the last couple of years of pandemic, we've all been given a bit of a chance to look at our lives differently. Yeah. And there are some people who are rushing back to try and recreate the past, and others who are going, no, this other thing has happened. Now, where do I go? And both are viable choices.
Yeah, and the beauty of being alive is that you have choices, right?
Exactly.
And everyone has different choices that are offered to them, right? Now, we don't all start off with the same baseline choices, right? But we all are offered choices, and those choices define who we are as people. And one of the things that I write about in my book, The Wedge, which is sort of the sequel to What Doesn't Kill Us, is that those choices change your nervous system, right? When I'm in ice water, my choice is to go to fight or flight or rest and digest. There's no third nervous system, right? You got those two branches. And if the nervous system is saying fight or flight, fight or flight, fight or flight, and I say no, rest and digest, and I can just think it, I can just think my way into rest and digest, that changes the way my body exists in that stressful environment. It changes, and every sensation that you ever feel in your life, whether it is a physical sensation or an emotional sensation, those are all choices. And the only reason that evolution gave us sensations is to exercise consciousness against those sensations. Like sometimes you want, like, I'm on fire, I want to put out the fire. That's a great sensation to go with. Put out that fire. Your nervous system was correct. Yeah. Go for it, nervous system. Thanks for the correct information. But in many other stimuli, it is that choice that you should exercise and decide what is actually how you should perceive the world. And that's like either a really simple idea that it should just be obvious, or that is like Buddha level enlightenment. I'm not sure which. And in some ways that's okay.
Yeah.
And the answer is yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
There you go. So
Great.
we always like to finish off our podcast by asking our guests, take 30 seconds to a minute if you need to think about it, but just say very quick, if you had to give one piece of advice on top of the mounds that you already have, if you had to give one piece of advice to leave our listeners with, what would that be? It could be related to anything. Doesn't have to be fitness, health, anything like that.
You don't always have to make a decision right now. You can sometimes take a few breaths. You can sometimes take a few seconds. In just about every situation, you don't have to immediately react. You can decide. And I think that is this is the Buddha level advice, is that, if there are maybe a few situations where if you don't, quickly react in milliseconds, that bad things will happen. But in most circumstances, even when I was being tumbled by this wave and held underwater for like between 45 seconds and a minute, I had time to think, right? And those decisions may have saved my life. And I think that realizing that even in the midst of tragedy and the worst case scenarios, there's always time to exercise a little bit of consciousness, and we should do that.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Thank you, sir. So as always, we will leave Scott's information in the bio below. You can check out his Instagram handle right there and his YouTube right there. Scott, is there anywhere or anything that you would like to promote? I mean, your books are all right behind you, so definitely go check those out as well.
Yeah, read all my books and fund my crypto account or whatever bullshit people are supposed to say.
No, I mean, hacker says.
Yeah. I got a great Ponzi scheme. Get in on early. No, I mean, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Google, I'm on all the places, and I'd love you to, come with me for my journey. YouTube is where I'm putting my effort in now, so that's cool. Perfect. I have a mailing list. You can find it all. ScottCarney.com. It's great.
There we go. It's in the bio, guys, so definitely check that out. And thank you so much, sir. This was honestly a lot to digest in this hour. I'm sure even myself and Walter will probably go back and listen to this more than once. But
really
awesome. Absolutely. Thank you so much. As always, guys, stay safe. Stay
easy.
I was going to take your line. There you go. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.